Lately, it feels like you can't really go online or watch the news without seeing some kind of really intense discussion about historical figures.
Oh, yeah.
Their good sides, the bad sides, what they mean today. It's a lot to keep track of.
It really is.
And honestly, sometimes it just feels like wading through this storm of opinions.
It really can. We're in a moment where so many different voices are amplified, and
Mhm.
trying to find a clear understanding of these complex topics can be a real challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And that's precisely what we're aiming for in this deep dive. We're looking at a recent perspective on Hotohai Aku, or Lord Shri Ram.
Hmm.
Our source today is the transcript of a YouTube video.
Right. The video, it's titled Kantablan Pampadakli Kompaklanakli Kompabakli to there. Vaidic Physics, Acharya Agnivrat, and it's
Yeah.
from the Vaidic Physics channel. It offers a fascinating contemporary engagement with these ancient narratives.
Okay.
It's definitely a response to perceived criticisms,
Mhm.
and it lays out a very specific viewpoint.
So our goal for you today is to really understand the core of what's being argued in this video about Shri Ram.
Right.
We'll look at the criticisms the speaker addresses, their reasons for, disagreeing with them, and the bigger picture they're trying to paint.
Kind of cut through the noise.
Exactly. We want to get to the heart of the matter without getting too bogged down in every single detail. Okay, so the speaker jumps right in with a pretty strong statement about a big conspiracy.
That's right. Yeah, the speaker begins by asserting that there is an active and significant conspiracy in India aimed at damaging the reputation of Sri Ram.
Wow. Okay.
So this isn't presented as just, different opinions, but as a deliberate effort to undermine a figure held sacred by many.
And to back this up, the speaker immediately points to some specific instances, right?
Yes, exactly. They cite a comment from a South Indian intellectual regarding Ram and Sita supposedly consuming alcohol, and also Swami Prasad Maurya's call for a ban on the Rumchart Manas.
Right.
The speaker presents these as sort of evidence of this broader, more organized effort. So what we're seeing here is a rhetorical strategy, really.
How so?
Well, the speaker is framing dissent against a revered figure as part of a larger negative movement.
And here's where it gets, well, really interesting. The speaker doesn't keep these criticisms of Sri Ram isolated. They connect them to a much wider range of issues in society today.
That's a key element of their argument, absolutely.
Yeah.
They draw lines between these perceived attacks on Sri Ram and other issues they see as deeply problematic in India.
Like what kind of issues?
Things like violence against women, beheadings, support for same-sex relationships, the rise of miracle babas, and the ongoing debates between Hindu and Muslim communities.
So whole range.
Yeah, the speaker views these as interconnected symptoms of a deeper cultural and societal issue.
And there's also this idea of outside forces being involved, a suspicion that these aren't purely internal Indian debates.
Absolutely. The speaker explicitly mentions foreign influence, saying, these white people mixed with us.
Okay.
This suggests a belief that external entities are actively involved in creating these controversies and, influencing certain parts of Indian society.
It's a very broad claim, and the speaker seems to believe that Sri Ram's importance and impact are felt far beyond just Ayodhya.
Precisely. The speaker asserts that there's global evidence of Sri Ram's historical presence and influence, even suggesting his wars extended into Europe.
Wow.
And they also mention the existence of advanced aircraft, or Vimana, during Sri Ram's era, painting a picture of a very advanced ancient civilization.
So the speaker is clearly very concerned about what they see as a negative portrayal of Sri Ram, but they also have some critical things to say about people who do consider themselves devotees.
Yes, this is a fascinating angle. The speaker criticizes those who engage in, say, temple worship and rituals dedicated to Ram, but maybe haven't deeply studied the Valmiki Ramayana.
Ah.
To truly understand his character and the ideals he represents, they suggest that much of contemporary worship is, well, superficial, lacking a real engagement with the foundational texts, and maybe a failure to embody Sri Ram's principles in daily life.
You can almost hear a real sense of loss in the speaker's voice when they talk about the distortion of Indian culture and literature.
Exactly. The speaker expresses concern that authentic Indian traditions and literary works have been misrepresented or even sort of taken, leading to a diminished understanding of the nation's heritage.
However, the speaker does acknowledge the deep and lasting presence of Sri Ram and Krishna in the hearts of many Indians, right? Even if they don't know all the details.
Yeah, they do. The speaker points to the common greeting Jai Shri Ram as an example of this deep cultural integration.
Right.
Even without detailed textual knowledge, these figures are, woven into the everyday lives of many people in India.
Now, the speaker shifts focus quite sharply here to criticize modern education, specifically colleges and universities.
Yes, this forms a significant part of their argument. The speaker claims that modern educational institutions are producing enemies of the nation.
Strong words.
Very strong. By promoting leftist ideologies, as they see it, through their curriculum and literature. This is a really strong indictment of the current state of higher education from their perspective.
And their critique doesn't end there. The speaker also expresses disappointment with the new education policy.
They do. They believe that those who design the new policy lack a proper understanding of Vedic scriptures.
Okay.
And they seem to regret that scholars from the Arya Sage, whom they consider more knowledgeable in these matters, weren't given a more prominent role in its development. There's a sense that a valuable source of traditional wisdom was overlooked.
The increasing presence of foreign university campuses in India also seems to be a concern for the speaker.
Yes, the speaker views this development as potentially harmful to Indian traditions, suggesting it could lead to the erosion of indigenous knowledge and cultural values, even if it's, presented as a positive step towards global engagement in education.
Okay, so we've covered the speaker's concerns about attacks on Sri Ram, their critique of contemporary devotees, and their views on the education system. Let's move on to their perspective on the authenticity of religious texts themselves. This seems to be a really crucial part of their argument.
It is indeed central to their viewpoint. The speaker argues that the Valmiki Ramayana, often considered the most authoritative version, has actually been altered over time.
Altered? How?
Well, adulterated is the term they might use.
Yeah.
Furthermore, they argue that the Ramcharitmanas, which is, widely beloved, isn't really a true Ramayana in the historical sense.
Okay.
They feel it contains less historical detail and more devotional content. Now, while acknowledging some valuable teachings within the Ramcharitmanas, the speaker believes these should have been identified and sort of considered separately much earlier.
That's interesting. It touches on a long-standing debate in textual criticism, doesn't it, about transmission and interpretation.
It really does. Different schools of thought have varying approaches to determining authenticity.
And they even bring up a significant historical figure to support this view.
Yes, Rishi Dayanand, the founder of the Arya Samaj, is mentioned.
Right.
The speaker emphasizes Dayanand's call to prioritize the study of original Vedic texts and to be cautious of, inauthentic scriptures. This aligns perfectly with the speaker's own skepticism about the current versions of the Ramayana.
The speaker also points out that even within different versions of the Valmiki Ramayana, there are variations.
Exactly. Using the Gita Press Gorakhpur edition as an example, the speaker notes that the versions we have today are compiled from different sources.
Which raises questions.
Right. Raising questions about why these differences exist and suggesting the possibility that a single original text may no longer be fully accessible.
And here's a really interesting connection the speaker brings up, David Childress and the idea of ancient flying machines.
Yeah, this is where the discussion takes a perhaps surprising turn for some listeners. The speaker refers to the work of David Childress, who has written about descriptions of Vimana.
The flying machines.
In ancient Indian epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata. The speaker points out that these descriptions are apparently absent in the Gita Press edition of the Ramayana.
Suggesting
this could be another example of important information being lost or maybe removed from the text over time.
So, if the speaker believes the existing texts might be flawed or adulterated, how do they propose we get to the true understanding of Sri Ram?
Well, the speaker proposes a specific method. They believe that the initial description of Sri Ram given by Narada Muni to Valmiki, that's the key.
The very beginning of the story.
Exactly. That initial description is considered the seed, the pure, unaltered core of Sri Ram's character.
Oh.
According to the speaker, any parts of the Ramayana that align with this original description are likely authentic,
Okay.
while anything that contradicts it should be considered later additions or adulterations.
It's like a blueprint, almost.
That's a good way to put it. Like a blueprint of a building, later additions might change the facade or add rooms, but the fundamental blueprint reveals the original design.
That's a really fascinating approach. And they even use an analogy to explain this idea of adulteration, right?
Yes. The speaker uses the analogy of a peepal tree growing on an old banyan tree.
A people on a banyan.
Yeah. Just as the qualities of a peepal tree are distinct from those of a banyan tree, any later additions to the Ramayana that don't fit with Narada's initial description are seen as sort of foreign elements that have grown onto the original narrative, potentially obscuring its true nature.
Okay, let's delve into this crucial seed then, Narada's description of Sri Ram. The speaker goes into great detail here, listing a significant number of virtuous qualities.
Indeed, it's presented as a really comprehensive portrait of an ideal being. According to the speaker, Narada describes Sri Ram as possessing mastery over his desires, being self-controlled, immensely brave, patient, and having conquered his senses.
Wow, that's already quite a list.
It is, and it keeps going. Sri Ram is also described as being highly intelligent just in his actions, an excellent speaker, beautiful in appearance, and prosperous. He is the one who defeats wicked enemies and is physically impressive as well.
Physically?
Yes, with broad shoulders, long arms, a neck shaped like a conch, a wide chest, a majestic forehead, and a graceful way of walking. So the speaker is presenting an image of Sri Ram as not just virtuous, but also physically powerful.
And it's not just about physical attributes and personal virtues, is it? There's also a strong emphasis on his knowledge and understanding of the world.
Absolutely. Sri Ram is portrayed as someone who understands the dharma, the inherent nature or duty of both sentient and insentient beings.
Which implies what exactly?
Well, encompassing both spiritual wisdom and scientific knowledge. To say Sri Ram knows the dharma of sentient and insentient beings implies a deep understanding of both the spiritual and material realms. He's called a great scientist, an expert in spiritual knowledge, always truthful and dedicated to the well-being of everyone. He is renowned, full of wisdom, pure in his being, and meditative.
The description continues to paint a picture of someone who protects and guides others, too.
Yes, Sri Ram is the protector of all living beings, the guardian of dharma, which here means more than just religious duty. It's like righteous conduct, cosmic order,
Got it.
and the defender of his own dharma, as well as the dharma of others. He is a protector of his people, skilled in the Vedas and their auxiliary texts, the Vedangas, and an expert in Dhanurveda, the art of archery and warfare.
So a warrior and a leader.
Definitely. A master of all weapons and war strategies, and someone who knows the essence of all scriptures. This highlights his role as not just a spiritual figure, but also a very capable leader and warrior.
And the speaker also highlights his mental and emotional strength.
Right. Sri Ram is said to possess a great memory and intellect, to be dear to all, gentle and humble in his demeanor, and importantly, never discouraged.
Never dejected.
Exactly. He's skilled in debate and is surrounded by virtuous people. He is described as Aryan, but in the sense of following divine laws, treating everyone equally, always appearing pleased, and never becoming angry.
The description concludes with some really powerful comparisons, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Sri Ram is likened to the vastness of the ocean in his depth, the steadfastness of the Himalayas in his patience.
Wow.
Equal in valor to Vishnu, and as beautiful as the moon. Towards his enemies, he is like a destructive fire, yet he is as patient as the earth and as generous as those who freely give their wealth.
It's an incredible portrait.
Ultimately, he is presented as the very embodiment of truth and righteousness. The speaker mentioned that this detailed description includes around 63 virtuous qualities.
63, okay. This very detailed list of virtues then leads into the speaker's challenge and call to action. What exactly are they asking of those who criticize Sri Ram?
Well, the speaker challenges those who criticize Sri Ram to engage in some deep introspection. Exactly. They ask them to examine their own lives in relation to the virtues that Narada attributed to Sri Ram, qualities like truthfulness, celibacy, benevolence, love for all beings, strength in both spiritual and scientific understanding, nonviolence, honesty, humility, and genuine love.
There's a really stark contrast the speaker draws between this ideal and what they see in society today.
Indeed. The speaker strongly criticizes those who, in their view, lead undisciplined lives,
How so?
contrasting them unfavorably even with animals and figures like Ravana, who they argue adhere to certain moral boundaries, or telekana. The underlying point is that those who lack self-control and ethical conduct themselves, well, they lack the moral standing to critique the life of Sri Ram.
The speaker also emphasizes the importance and credibility of those who originally documented the Ramayana, right?
Yes, the speaker argues that highly respected figures like Brahma, Narada, and Valmiki, and they specifically describe Valmiki as a great scientist, wouldn't have collaborated to write the life story of someone who was ordinary or flawed.
So their involvement itself is proof of Sri Ram's greatness in this view.
That's the argument, yes. Their involvement underscores the exceptional nature of Shri Ram.
And the speaker views criticisms of Sri Ram as actively harming Indian culture.
Very much so. The speaker strongly condemns those who, in their words, pollute the garden of Indian culture with their criticisms.
And they link this back to the textual issues.
They do. They believe that the errors and additions that may have crept into the religious texts were introduced by the very same kinds of people or ideologies that are now actively trying to create division and animosity towards Indian traditions.
So what does the speaker propose as the way forward then, if the texts are potentially altered and society is being criticized?
Yeah. Well, the speaker calls for a removal of these perceived adulterations from the religious texts and a return to what they consider the true original teachings.
Okay.
They emphasize the importance of cultivating common sense, which they interestingly believe is linked to you test pure food and living a virtuous life.
Why pure food?
The idea seems to be that purity in diet and lifestyle helps in discerning truth from falsehood. They also critique modern models of development that, in their view, lead to destruction, contrasting them with the principles of true Dharma.
The call to action from the speaker sounds very passionate, almost urgent.
It really is.
Yeah.
The speaker urges listeners to awaken their intellect, to avoid being manipulated by divisive forces, and to recognize the shared ancestry and greatness of all Indians. They advocate for a critical study of religious texts, including scriptures beyond Hinduism, like the Quran and the Bible, and they question the value of criticizing one's own ancestors. Does it really serve any positive purpose?
A rhetorical question, perhaps.
Seems like it. There's a strong emphasis on inner purification through practices like the Gayatri Mantra and meditation.
And the speaker also gives a warning about the consequences of not respecting revered figures, doesn't he?
Yes. The speaker cautions about the negative repercussions of disrespecting such figures. They personally express their deep reverence for Sri Ram, stating their own insignificance in comparison, not even equal to the dust of his feet, is the phrase used.
That's quite a statement.
It is. They also affirm their own commitment to truthfulness and ethical conduct, framing the protection of Sri Ram's character as a responsibility for anyone who values humanity, God, and truth.
The speaker even directly addresses atheists at one point.
Yes, they challenge those who don't believe in God to consider the concepts of high sin and the possibility of a divine being.
Interesting.
And even for those who oppose Sri Ram, or perhaps use his stories for commercial gain, the speaker hopes they might adopt at least one of his truthful qualities.
So a sliver of hope, even for opponents.
It seems so. The speaker's overarching concern is clearly about ongoing conspiracies and internal conflicts that they believe are weakening the nation.
The speaker's conclusion seems to really emphasize a sense of shared identity and heritage, tying it all back together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The speaker uses really powerful imagery, reminding listeners that they carry the blood of Sri Ram within them and that their bodies are composed of the same fundamental cosmic elements.
The implication being?
The implication is powerful. Criticizing Sri Ram is ultimately a form of self-harm or a denial of one's own heritage. The video concludes with a very strong call to recognize what the speaker believes to be the truth and to join their campaign to protect the country and humanity.
So, to wrap up this deep dive into the video transcript, we've definitely encountered a very strong defense of Sri Ram. The speaker expresses deep concerns about what they perceive as attacks on his reputation, connects these to broader societal issues, and offers criticisms of both those who denigrate Sri Ram and those who they feel don't truly understand or live by his ideals.
And we've also examined the speaker's perspective on the authenticity of religious texts, their emphasis on Narada's initial description of Sri Ram as the kind of ultimate standard.
Yes, a seed.
The seed, exactly. And their call for introspection and a return to what they consider traditional values.
This deep dive certainly provides a distinct and contemporary viewpoint on a figure of immense historical and cultural significance. It really invites us and you to consider the speaker's arguments and the historical and philosophical questions they raise.
It really prompts us to reflect on the nature of tradition, the challenges involved in interpreting ancient texts, and, the complexities of understanding historical figures in our modern world, where so many different interpretations are constantly being presented.
Right. And that leads us to a final thought for you to maybe mull over. In a world where historical and religious figures are interpreted in so many different ways, how do we navigate these differing views in a way that promotes understanding rather than division?
Yeah, that's the key question.
And what role does our own personal reflection play in shaping our understanding of these figures and their enduring legacies? It's definitely something to consider further.